Well, I think that identification of children with sexual behavior problems really is something important that we need to have training about. I think it gives us an opportunity to really address issues in a multidisciplinary approach in a way that deals with and allows us to really target treatment, to effectively protect for the safety of victims, to deter future criminal or delinquent behavior. I think it also really helps us promote overall the well-being and the health of the child and the family unit.
Great. And maybe you could say what you would hope the frontline person who might be getting this training, what they would, how that would improve, our response, our future. Just by saying I hope, or I would, so that you're speaking to them. You're talking to the law enforcement who's sitting out there in that training, like, what the heck am I doing here? DCS.
Well, I think what I would say to those first responders, those law enforcement officers, those CPS officers, is that really this is a way to learn about collaboration, to learn from each other the issues that confront the child, the dynamics of what is needed in treatment, in prevention, in safety, so that we can come together and promote education, training, and protocol for everybody to work together for the best interest of the child. I think one of the benefits of being aware of and understanding the issues of children with sexual behavior problems is it really gives us as law enforcement and as prosecutors, court personnel, judges, the ability to understand how we can craft a rehabilitation plan once there's a finding of delinquency or sexual offense, so that we can really address the needs of the child so that he won't reoffend, so that we protect victims, and so that ultimately there can be a healthy, reunified family unit where this child can grow. I think the cons are obviously the converse of that. If we don't know or we're not aware of all of the aspects of what it means to deal with or to treat or to identify a child who is acting out sexually or that has sexual behavior problems, then we can't properly address the problem in court in a legal way. We can't address it from a rehabilitative way because we don't have all the pieces to the puzzle. I think anytime you're dealing with a child, especially of a younger age, where we have identified that child as having some sexual behavior problems, clearly the juvenile justice system, from the standpoint of police and prosecutors, the goal and the purpose of that system is to rehabilitate the child, not necessarily to punish or stigmatize the child. We want to, and we have the opportunity at that young age to identify, to correct, to rehabilitate, and ultimately promote a good, law-abiding, healthy adult citizen. That should always be the goal. Clearly, safety and protection of victims, both inside that family unit and outside in the community, are important. But clearly what we want to do is identify and understand this child's needs so that this doesn't happen again.
Well, first of all, knowledge is power. I think we have, society especially, has this preconceived idea that we intuitively know how to parent kids and how to handle problems with kids, especially problems about sex. We should naturally know how to do that. Well, the fact of the matter is most people don't know how to naturally do that, and everybody could use a little guidance. But when you're talking about kids that have problems and are sexually acting out, that's not a simple thing to address. And these aren't throwaway kids. I mean, we need to be trying to figure out how we can save these kids and make them productive in our society. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to listen to the experts tell us the things that we should be doing and the things that we definitely shouldn't be doing. Because oftentimes, even in our well-meaning actions, we do things that just cause so much more damage to the children. And so I think we should always welcome opportunities to hear from the people that have the expertise to tell us, these kids are doing this because of this, and these are the kind of things that we should be doing to help them. So we're all about prevention. We're also all about helping victims. And when you're talking about kids that have been sexually abused and then who now are actively acting out on other people, other children, those kids are victims. They're victims. Yeah, they might have acted out on a child, but they're trying to make sense of what happened to them. You know, as adults, it's hard for us to understand child sex abuse. I mean, we can't wrap our mind around it. And imagine a little kid who doesn't know anything about sex, doesn't know anything about what's right or wrong, and then to have that perpetrated on them. What they're doing is they're trying to make sense of what happened to them. It doesn't make it right, but that's what they know. And so it's our job to take care of these kids and to guide them out of that victimization and help them look at things in a different way. And we can't do it if we don't have the knowledge, the expert knowledge to do it. And the only way we're going to get that is listening to the experts tell us what to do.
How important is it for, families who have a child who may have acted out on other children may be very embarrassed and don't want a lot of people to know. But how important is it for people to work together to help rehabilitate that child and to be part of that team in looking for those warning signs and behaviors and to redirect that child?
I think it's human nature to kind of want to minimize and to ignore big problems, because if you minimize and ignore, you don't have to really directly address it. But when you do that, then you're creating a bigger problem. So it's really important for everyone to kind of be open with each other, so you can all work together and help each other save that child, and prevent future victimizations.
If you had a vision for the future in regards to this issue, what would it look like?
I really think knowledge is power. And the more information that we have, if you don't know anything about, if you see an older child perpetrating on another, your first reaction is fury. You dirty little thing, you. But when you realize what happened to that child and what's going on with him behind the scenes and the possibilities of, healing that child. I mean, if he had a broken arm, you wouldn't be calling him a dirty little kid for having a broken arm. This kid is broken, and for no fault of his own.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Anything else?
You're looking at me.
Oh, I'm looking at you. Okay. Well, I'm really excited of what's going on with this Child with Sexual Behavior Problems Collaborative. We've known for a long time that children have sexual behavior, and I think we've had a tendency to either overreact or underreact, and neither of those are good for children. I think the kind of work that you all are doing in training CPS and training police is to be able to identify those youth who are engaging in kind of normal kind of sexual behavior for their development level versus those who are not, that we really need to get services. And I think that's probably one of the most important things, that people have the information about what's developmentally appropriate and what's not developmentally appropriate, so that we can respond appropriately, so that we're not mislabeling youth as kind of perpetrators, and recognizing how these kids differ from adolescent offenders and from adult offenders.
That's great. Okay, can you go into what might be your hope that this one thing, I mean, I think that part about the differences between the child with a sexual behavior problem and the adolescent sex offender.
I think, I kind of go back in my own career to starting 30-some years ago. And sometimes I feel responsible in the state because we developed a long time ago kind of guidelines for adolescent offenders, actually in the 80s. And we developed those, as it turned out, based on a good deal of ignorance. And we kind of perpetuated a myth that all adolescent offenders are kind of junior adult offenders, and we found out they're not, that most of them desist this behavior. And I think sometimes that's spilled down now that we talk about some of these young children, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, as junior perps. And it just, if someone has worked in the sex offender field, that's just so inappropriate. These kids are just very, very different. The etiology is probably different. Their research suggests they're highly responsive to treatment. And we also know there's a lot of these youth that we should probably have minimal interventions, and that the intervention should really be focused on caretakers and teachers about what is normal, and so that we're not having this overreaction to a child engaging in kind of developmentally appropriate kind of behaviors because we're uncomfortable. So we've had a tendency in the kind of, at least from the sex offender side, is try to, first apply kind of adult standards to adolescent standards, and we found out that's wrong and may have been doing more harm than good. And then we kind of spilled it down and applying adolescence to children who are kind of totally different groups. So if we can reach out to those people who have the very difficult task of trying to investigate these, and I'm glad I'm not one of those, because I'm not saying this is an easy task, but it's a very important task. I think one thing that we have not recognized in the field, that I think we recognize now, is that if we kind of over-program youth who are not at high risk, it's not like it does harm. If we convince an 8-year-old that they're a sexual perpetrator when they're engaging in kind of normal, developmentally appropriate behavior, we can actually make those youth worse. We have them start self-labeling themselves as, gee, there's something wrong with me, I'm deviant, or I wouldn't have all these people, in my life. So I think a key is that those people who are tasked with that very, very difficult job of investigating have the best knowledge they can to make the best decision. Because my belief is we all want, what's best for children, but sometimes our knowledge base makes it difficult for us to do our job, and I think that's what's really important that's going on in this project.
That's great, Bill. Very good. All right. Anything else you want to?
I think this is a great opportunity. In terms of the Department of Children's Services, we've never really addressed this population and the challenges that we face when we get involved with families that have children with sexual behavior problems. The policies don't necessarily support the practice because we've not had the information we needed before. And this is a great opportunity for our staff to understand child development, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, and what is sex abuse and what's not sexual abuse with the very young children. It will be very, very instrumental in helping them assess a family's needs and determining whether a child is safe or whether other children in the home are safe, and then coursing a plan of action or accessing appropriate services for a child who has sexual behavior problems.
Very well said. Very good.
Anything else?
Do I have questions?
Am I done?
These guys.
Let's
are
see,
really good.
we hit training, we hit,
Why don't you guys just talk for a bit? Talk for like 2 minutes.
I think it will be helpful too in helping us determine whether a child needs to be removed from a family. I do think sometimes we jump to the wrong conclusions if we don't understand child sex abuse in this context, in terms of children with sexual behavior problems and what we could expect in a family or a situation where that's involved. Okay. This training also gives us the opportunity and the exposure to familiarize ourselves with some sexual terms, the terminology, child development, and be able to practice that on children and talking to other adults about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Oftentimes that is not a focus of some of the training that we have, and we don't have a comfort level to really engage a family or a child in that discussion. This will afford us the opportunity to talk amongst ourselves professionally and then to carry that out into the communities and the families that we're working with.